question. Thanks for picking it. My name is Jenny Gartwa. I'm the CEO of a company called Go Nimbly. We're a revenue operations consultancy specifically centered and focused in the SaaS space. So today's session, you joined it, so you already know, but it is called PLG Alphabet Soup. And we are going to talk about every acronym you ever heard about, PQAs and PQLs and MQAs and SQLs and LMNOPs and, I don't know, USBs. And if we were all live, I might yell out, "You down with the OPP?" And everybody would yell, "Yeah, you know me," but we're not, so I won't. So why am I up here talking about PLG? Well, these are all the logos that we've worked with. And you can see that they are all known for having a PLG motion. But the truth of the matter is, if you've been on LinkedIn in the last, I don't know, couple of years, you know that PLG has had a huge hype. Everybody latched on to PLG and PLS. And, you know, maybe we're going through the trough of disillusion a little bit, maybe not, but ultimately we've been doing this for a long time. We've been doing PLG motions. We just weren't calling it that. Twilio was one of our first clients. If there's any engineers on here or any technical folk, well, we obsessed with that persona, and we thought about how do we open up, the access to the product so that developers can get in there. How do we evangelize this persona? How do we give them the documents and content that they need to be successful without ever talking to a salesperson? But we called that developer first. And Coursera, right? Like during the pandemic, the influx of students coming through to consume their content was honestly insane, and we did a lot of work to build that infrastructure to manage that influx. And we were talking about the onboarding flow and the sign-up flow. If there's anybody on here that's maybe not a native English speaker, Zendesk, we translated a bazillion nurtures, I think in over, I don't remember what it was, over 10 languages. All the free trial flows, and we looked closely at what it took to convert free trial to paid, and should we do 15 days or 30 days? But again, we call that our free trial flow. We didn't call that PLG. The point I'm making with all these examples is that as an industry, we've been doing PLG for a long time. It just has formally gotten a name and formally gotten a lot of attention. But we don't have to reinvent, the playbook. There are companies that we can learn a lot from. So let me kind of pause there and tell you a little bit of a story about, I think it was kind of early 2010s. I just moved to New York. I got my first job as a marketing automation consultant at a company called Blue Wolf. They were one of the biggest Salesforce partners. I don't know what was going on in 2010. I think probably the Corona and the serious decisions demand waterfall was like the big hot thing. And I don't know if I'm giving flashbacks to anybody, if anybody remembers these two, but the one on the left is 2002, and the one on the right was updated 10 years later. And here's where our first acronym of the day, the MQL, was hot, right? And marketing qualified leads were the belle of the ball. They were amazing. They were going to change, the way that we did outbound. We were, only going to call leads when they were ready, when they were warm, and that's when they were going to talk to sales. We were going to make sure that they had consumed content and they were like ready for that conversation. And we were going to get such better conversion. And actually in the screenshots that I took here, I left GE's name in here because that was actually one of my first customers. And we implemented a lead scoring system and MQL criteria for like 10 different business units. Same thing over and over and over. And there was actually a lot of really fabulous energy in the room when we were defining these lead scores. We were really thinking about the customer, putting ourselves in different personas' shoes and thinking, all right, when they're making this decision or when they're showing awareness for a product, what pages are they visiting? What content are they downloading? What third-party data do we have? What are the, firmographic data points that we should look for so that we know that somebody's ready to talk to us? And we were obviously convinced that this was going to increase conversion. We're going to wait till they're warm. And it was actually really exciting. That is until we got a call from one of the sales leaders. And for the sake of today, let's call him Tom, because that was his name. And Tom needed 20 more leads. Okay, so Tom calls and was like, all right, we need to increase the volume of leads. We have a new SDR class. We need more volume. And we didn't have, the volume of sales ready leads because the whole point of this exercise was to identify people when they were sales ready, not to create a threshold. And so, we didn't have the time to create more content and more nurture campaigns and re-engage with prospects and throw more events and, whatever else. So instead, we did what I think many of us did, and we lowered the threshold. And I wish I could tell you it happened just once, but we quickly went from 100 to 90 to 87 to, 62, go on. And, ultimately we had to feed the sales team. And I wish I could tell you that this was just one tough client, but this happened a lot across a lot of our customers. And if you're not careful, I'm telling you the story on the MQLs because we're going to repeat our mistakes in the PLG space. So that takes me to one of my first takeaways here, which is as you're coming together and defining this sort of PLG PLS world, make sure the conversation is centered around the customer. What do they need? What information, what signals would they show you, and what do they need to have the best experience with you and get the most ROI and value, out of your product? Because we all love PLG, right? Like this promise of PLG is really beautiful. And the idea being that we can monetize users without human interference. But, most companies at the end of the day, need a sales motion. And typically I've read differing data points, but around the $5 million ARR mark, you'll start to see sales teams really forming. And as you can see, this Clearbit, source is that 95% of businesses that distribute through PLG have a sales department. All the logos I showed earlier have a sales department. And the companies that we often reference, your Notions, your Slacks, your Figmas, they have a sales team. So the real work is balancing. It's not deciding whether or not you need a sales team. It's not deciding whether or not a sales motion is right for you. Sure, there's timing. But your real work is how are you going to balance out your PLG and your sales motion together so that your sales team doesn't cannibalize your PLG magic. We don't want to see the same thing that happened to MQLs happen here, right? Which would look like you have this PLG motion, you're acquiring all these users, and then your sales team calls them as soon as they sign up, where they haven't had that chance to have that aha moment with your product and really get the value out of it. Okay, so we're talking about, I made the comparison of MQLs to PQLs. So I think it's interesting to look at the difference in the definitions. Why do we love PQLs is because kind of free trial PQL conversion to paid customers, it's like a 25% conversion, where when you're looking at your conversion rate from free accounts to paid accounts, 9%, right? So we know PQLs works. We know incorporating this is going to convert people to more paid. We know that the conversion rate of PQLs is much higher than an MQL, right? So PQLs here, 15 to 30%, that's huge. So the truth of the matter is the left-hand side's the same. For both PQLs and MQLs, we want an ICP. And what's an ICP? It's these guys. I don't know if Insane Clown Posse is anybody's cup of tea. Dumb joke, but I actually went to one of their concerts and pretty rad. It was at a festival and amazing. But an ICP is who we want to do business with, right? And you start with your ICP, ideal customer profile. And it's typically demographics. And it's the same thing that you've done in the past for MQLs. It's, do we want to do business with these people? And then we can layer on behavior, right? And so this is where typically it changes. For MQLs, we're looking for online or marketing engagement behavior. Your website visits, your email opens, your event attendance, your content downloads, all that good stuff. For PQLs, you're usually layering on product data. So we're looking at in-app behavior. But the truth of the matter is most businesses that are, kind of at their peak and the best operators are actually doing both. They're mixing these signals. So the best companies are looking not only at product usage, but also layering in marketing usage and bonus points that you can also add third-party intent data, for example. So layering all this through all this kind of raw data that we have to essentially create signals to say that somebody's ready for a human-led moment. So the other thing is you'll notice I typically default to saying PQLs, but ultimately we do sell to individuals. So the actual user and the champion and the people that you work with are really important. But when we look at the definition and how we elevate these, ready to buy leads, we actually are looking at the account level. So let's look at when we look at the product qualified account, we're actually looking at usage across the instance of a specific product. So we're consolidating that usage over multiple users and trying to understand how's this company leveraging the product and what could they need next. Then we can elevate kind of our most engaged users or champions or specific folks that we think are important to the conversation and look at and identify that buying group. Where when we think about PQLs, it's usually kind of one individual. Your PQL is not always your buyer, right? You could have these power users, these folks that are really leveraging your platform who might not actually have influence on the deal. So we want to look at PQAs. The best salespeople will look at that, and then they'll try to figure out the entire buying group and engage several folks. So that's my big takeaway number 2. In the battle of PQAs versus PQLs, PQAs win. PQAs are rad. We're going to go with a PQA framework, and then also, of course, elevate the champions and the users that are going to be important to your deal. So that might make you think, is the MQL dead? Is it over? The truth is that, it's just being expanded on. Again, the customers that I see that are really killing it here are thinking about identifying out of all of our users and customers or even prospects, they're looking at multiple usage signals to identify someone that's ready for a conversation or ready for the next step. Because your customers are going to engage with any of your funnels, right? They're not going to be in your product-led funnel versus your sales-led funnel. They're going to go back and forth. Somebody that's an MQL or was engaging with your marketing content can sign up and become a user. A user may submit a contact us form. So monitoring content and monitoring online engagement isn't dead. Having contact us forms and demos and having product signups, that's not dead. Your customers are just not going through a singular funnel. They're going through, I don't know, for lack of a better word, a hybrid funnel. They're not following the, internal silos that you've got. So because the same customer is going to be led by sales and product and events and social, we have to think about this as a bit more of a flexible model. So, this is the best way that I can explain this is we're very focused on that PLG framework and that PLG motion, but you can also layer community-led engagement or community or event-led. You can also kind of look at the dark funnel, how people are engaging in things that you can't track. Our view is that very similar to ABM, PLG and PLS are go-to-market motions. The larger your company is and as the bigger you get, the more motions you're going to have. So think about this as a way that your customer can engage, not that they have to pick a lane. I'm not going to say the same thing again. You're going to have multiple funnels. Your buyer doesn't care about which funnel you think they're in. So we've talked a lot about, kind of the theory behind all this, and I wanted to give real examples to make it less ambiguous if it is at all. So you're going to have multiple definitions of your PQAs, okay? And if you look at the left-hand side, you're actually going to have different outcomes. So a lot of the examples that you'll often hear are around how do I convert free to paid users, or how do I find expansion opportunities within my user base. Absolutely very valid use cases. But you can also have use cases for adoption. If there's certain things you might know that adopting certain features or not certain features can increase, kind of a renewal and ROI of your customer. You might have things routed and done as adoption plays. You might have renewal or early renewal identification where you're going to elevate this to a CSM. You might even have playbooks specifically for mitigating churn, and so having kind of churn signals identified. So to dive into one of these, one of my favorite ones is the kind of expansion playbook around multiple departments. So in a single instance, you could be tracking whether or not you have more than one highly engaged user within 2 different departments. So we're layering on maybe department and title data with usage data. And if you're seeing that both sales and product are utilizing your product, you might be able to escalate that and have a conversation about moving them to an enterprise level tier where maybe they get single sign-on or better features or better security, and you're elevating that conversation because you have multiple departments. Neither one of those active users might be the ones that can make that final decision, but through their, kind of championing their product, we can have that expansion conversation. What you'll see at the bottom of here is I'm not always suggesting that you have to route things to an AE or an AM. You can route things to a CSM around early renewals or churn risks or around adoption. You could even route these to an executive if you so wanted to. The idea being that we're identifying a conversation has to happen and routing that to the right person. Some things that you'll see when you're starting to build these definitions is you can pick from a ton of different data points. And you can mix and match these, right? You can look at ICP fit, you can look at product signals, you can look at engagement signals, you can look at intent signals, and you can mix and match these, and you should be testing these, and you should be changing these. Because ultimately, the moment that your product changes and you have different features, your definition of an engaged customer is going to change. If you are going after a new vertical or a new persona and they engage with your product differently, all this is going to fuel having different definitions, and having a growth marketing mindset in this is really powerful. Creating like a system that can change with you, because you should have different PQL, PQA definitions, and they should change. It's the same thing I would say with MQLs, but often people input a lead scoring program and just let it go forever. I think you can borrow and learn a lot, like I said, from growth teams on always testing this and always testing each play and seeing which one works. All right, so we've talked about identifying, I'm calling this a human-led moment, again, because it's not just sales ready, it's not just a lead that I'm creating. We're going to create a system essentially to route this. So you're going to identify that somebody needs a human-led moment, and you're going to route that to sales or CS or C-level or an implementation team or support, whoever it is, and need to build this flexible system to identify these leads and offer up those insights to your rep. Because there is nothing more frustrating than being a power user and then having a conversation with that company, and you might be really excited. Maybe you're a power user of this product and you're excited to talk to someone because you think they're going to delight you, and you're going to feel really seen about how much you love their product. And then you get into a conversation where it's very basic, or they're asking you how you use your product, or telling you about a feature that you already heavily adopt. We have to enable the individuals that are having this conversation to understand how the user is actually using the product. So route it to the right person and give them the insight to the signals. And I'm pulling this up again because I think I've kind of teased this a little bit, but we can't let our internal silos get in the way of a great customer experience. And I put there in parentheses internal bullshit, right? Like that our systems aren't integrated, or that our reps don't have access to the data, or that our teams don't talk enough. We can't have that keeping you from delighting your customer. I have like a little story here where I was working with a Series B company, and they were moving from founder-led to sales-led, and the conversion rate was like really down, and they didn't know why. And so we sat down and we did rep rides. And when we did those rep rides, we found out that the sales team didn't have access to usage. And so they were picking up the phone and just asking the customer, hey, how are you using it? Are you happy? Do you know about this feature? Instead of what the founder was doing, which was going into the product, understanding their usage and their signals, realizing how they could get more value. And then when they hopped on the phone, they were an advisor. They were teaching, their user how to get more value and recommending new features and upsells. So, obviously, being an advisor and enabling our team to have that kind of strength is a huge part of being able to keep conversion rates high. So, a quick kind of nirvana of all this, right? So if you implement everything that we've just talked about, you're going to really focus on creating a flexible system, because everything should change. Your PQA and PQL definition should change. You're going to have that experimentation and growth marketing mindset. You're going to focus on that handoff architecture and make sure that things are getting routed not only to the right person, but with the right information so they can have that really thoughtful conversation. Having a simple yet automated process, something that you can change. So how do we get an actual record or opportunity created with the right champions associated, tag that it's an expansion and kind of ready to route? Creating playbooks and making sure that they're accessible and that folks are enabled. And then a reporting to commitment, we have to find out which one of these plays is working and which one isn't, so we can keep going. And then last but not least, no toms, right? Like we're not going to just change the threshold to create more PQLs or call every sign up. We are, going to really focus on that customer. So repeating, make the customer at the center. It's not your internal BS. PQAs are better than PQLs. You're gonna have multiple funnels, so remember that it should be kind of one hybrid experience for your customers. And then your PQA, PQLs, MQL, MQAs definitions should be changing to meeting where your product is at, where your customer's at, any new verticals, any new trends, and to be testing it. So that might feel a little bit overwhelming. It's quite a lot, but if you're getting started, it's totally fine to start with one playbook. Start with a multiple department usage, sort of kind of a leveling to a different tier playbook. Find instances where you've got two champions from two different departments using your product, or they're in one of your lower tiers, and that they're large enough for this to be compelling. So look at some company data and enable a few of your sellers onto that playbook, track that conversion and see if it's worth, automating this. Spoiler alert, it will be. Being really thoughtful about which of our users we call and how we call them is going to increase conversion for you. And last but not least, don't forget to layer on ICP. I know it seems really, really silly, but ICP is something that a lot of folks miss, where they start sending leads of like highly engaged users to the sales team, but then they're really tiny customers or customers outside of the vertical that they work in, and we don't close those and we piss off the sales team. So whoop whoop, that's an ICP reference for anyone that doesn't know it. Anyway, I would love to chat with you more if you've got questions around PLG, PLS, RevOps, all the way that these systems are implemented. So hit me up on LinkedIn. That's where I talk professionally. If you find me on Twitter, that's just where I yell at Delta for having bad coffee. So you can follow me there. Jokes aside, thank you so much for listening to me and chatting through this. And I wish you luck on your PLG motion.